Today I would like to share about types of studies, but I live stream share a string horizontally so then easy to see. So now talk about the types of studies, so design and method. Example, firstly, so talk about a cross-sectional study that is observational, and we collect data from the group of people, so then we can evaluate the prevalence of disease. It's not incidence, just prevalence of disease and associated risk factors. So this important uh, in associated risk factor at the specific point of time. Okay, at specific point of time. So and the questions, which is what's happening. So happening, which is something happening, something going on. So in the present time. So measure about the disease prevalence of disease. So I can show an association between risk factor and disease, but they cannot establish the cause effects. Okay, cannot establish causality. Number two, we talk about case control study. So this observational and retrospective. So remember something in the past. That's why retrospective. So something happened already. So compare the group of the people. So we compare the group of people with disease and without disease. So which is have two groups of people. One group have a disease A or B or C, something like that, and the other one so without disease, A, B, C, something like that. Okay. So we look for risk factor. Look for the risk factor or the prior exposures. So this one is what happened. So this the question is what happened, which means that something happened in the past already. Okay, and it's an odds ratio. So for example, we want to know the patient with the COPD or lung cancer, something like that. So have a higher prevalence of the smoking. So then the group of people without COPD or without lung cancer. For example, if they want to find out, so they want to find out in the lung cancer and the people with the lung cancer and people without lung cancer. Okay, and then they want to find out and they want to see the prevalence of the smoking in the people with lung cancer and people without lung cancer, and they see which is with lung cancer and the prevalence of the smoking. Okay, in those people, in those patients is higher than those without smoke or without COPD. Okay, so which is they study something happened already. So in the past, so because something happened already, so which is they how they can do that, and maybe they can collect the data in the hospital where or something like that. They go to hospital A, B, C, etc., or somewhere they can collect the information so of the patients there with the permission, something like that. Okay, and they do research. Yeah, so because something happened already, so that's why for this type of research, which they save more money than the one we call this the next one, which is cohort study. So now number 3, which is cohort study. Cohort study, so which is observational and also retrospective or prospective. Okay, so prospective, which is something when we study something in the future, something uh, uh, will happen. Okay, that's a kind of prospective. So we compare the group of people, so group with a certain risk factor or exposure to the group without such a risk factor, without the exposure. Okay, then we will examine the likelihood of the exposures and getting a disease. So we examine the likelihood exposures getting a disease. Okay, and then we can predictive, so asking who will develop a disease that's in the future, or so retrospective, which is asking who developed the disease, so which is something in the past. So for example, like this, the way we do like this, then we see, for example, the exposure or risk factor A or B or C, something like that. Okay, and like we are the researchers or scientists or doctors, we think about in the, for example, in that local area, we saw something happening. The people live in that local, then exposed with the risk factor A, something like that, huh? Okay, but we think about maybe the risk factor, uh, with the risk factor A like that, so for many years. So if the patient in the future contact exposed, right, with this risk factor A, it probably can develop the disease A, for example, lung cancer, right? Then we think about like that, then we do the research. So that's what we call this prospective, which is for the 10 years. We monitor for the 10 years. So the way we do like that, which is we collect the data. We collect the people. We divide it two group, right? One group so exposed with this risk factor A, and one group not does not explore with the risk factor A. Okay, and we monitor for the 10 years. Of course, when we do that, we have to measure for example, measure kind of the best we can about age and about right age, and then the career and where they live exactly similar, and what career they do, so the environment, everything like that. So I try to match them, so and also age similar. So then one group which is exposed with risk factor A, one group without. For example, some more specific, let's say for the group exposed with the risk factor A, we collect 5 people, and group uh, without exposing with the factor A, so we also collect 5 people, and we monitor for the 10 years. Now more specific, we say this risk factor, which is smoking, right? So 5 people, so they exposed with the smoking. It could be directly smoking or just secondhand smoking. So maybe better to directly smoke, which is five smokers, right? And another group which is non-smokers, five people without smoking, okay, and monitor for 10 years or 5 years, something like that. And then after 10 years, right, and then we saw in the group exposed, which is with the smoking, which is people, five people smokers, right, and then have two of them develop lung cancer. So in contrast, other group, for example, without exposing the smoking, so to have a one person, so develop lung cancer. So then, what we say about this, and we see this, they call this R of, which is a relative risk. So equal what? Equal 2 over 1 equal 2, right? So then we can say, so after 10 years, so right, when we saw, we will see, in the group of people exposed with smoking, so have a 2 times higher than the, which is 2 times, what 2 times develop the lung cancer is higher than the group people without exposed smoking, which is without smoking, right? Okay, so for the cohort study, and you know about the relative risk, similar for COPD, the example the same. Now the next one we talk about twin concordance study. So which compare the frequency of vegetables, the this identical twins, which is monozygotic twins. So and all the both this is fraternal twins, which is dizygotic twins, so develop the same disease. So we measure about genetic factor and which is we measure the heritability, the genes, and the influence of environmental factors. So that stands for which is nature versus nurture. Nature, which we talk about genetics, and nurture, we talk about environmental factors, education, the way to develop, the way they grow up. So go to school and interact with the people and develop the behaviors and things like that. Okay, and versus about change. So that's about the twin concordance study. So about the monozygotic twin or dizygotic twins. So talk about next one, which is adoption study. Adoption study compare the siblings raised by their own parents, which is biological parents versus adoptive parents. So then also they measure about the same. They measure like the previous study type. They measure the gene, which is heritability and environmental factors. So affects them. So with the children grow by the biological parents compare with the adoptive parents. You see they anything different or anything the same, something like that. Okay, so now summaries we just shared about the cross-sectional study and case control study, cohort study, and twin concordance study, and adoptive study. So let's say here like that, and then we see here what they talk about that. So talk about, for example, cross-sectional study. cross-sectional study. So we would like to learn more about AI. They say anything or not? So AI. So right here we read the AI overview. So they say cross-sectional study is a type research design that analyzes data from the population or a representative subset at one specific point in time. Keep in mind. So this is a specific point in time. So it's used to understand the prevalence of certain characteristics or identify relationships between variables at a single moment. So, okay. In the context, cross-sectional studies are used to examine knowledge, perceptions, attitude. Oh wow, they put the AI here. Okay, anyway, it means I want to read what AI talk about. So, like that. So let's say I just remove the word AI. The purpose they say AI, which I want to read them. They say this is a time observational study analyze the population data at a specific point in time, which is one prevalence of disease. Okay, what is cross-sectional in research? Right here. So time design the data collection population that which we just read it. Okay. So then that now we talk about case control study. Case control study. So case control study is a type of observational study. So not only just observational, So this is a retrospective as well. So study that compares a group of people with the specific disease or conditions, these are cases, to the group of people without disease or condition, which are controls. The goal is to identify factors that may be associated with disease by looking back in time to see what exposures or characteristics differ between the two groups. So key features of case control study retrospective. Case control studies look backward in time to examine past exposures or risk factors. So outcome-based participants are selected based on whether they have the outcome of interest, disease, or condition. Comparison cases are compared to controls who do not have an outcome, so who do not have a disease, to identify potential risk factor. Okay, so like that. Now talk about cohort study. Keep in mind case control study, which is something happened already, right? Cohort study, which is will happen, or also something happened already too. But cohort study is style observational, which is also the perspective, which is in the future will happen, or retrospective, which is happened in the past already. So cohort study is a type of observational research that follows a group of people or cohort over time to see how certain factors like exposure to a risk factor influence their health outcomes. So these studies are longitudinal, meaning they track participants over an extended period. The key feature is that the cohort shares a common characteristic such as age or location. So like we mentioned earlier, So I try to matching the two group by age, so career and location, etc. Where they live, where they work, etc. By tracking the cohort, researchers can identify factors that increase the risk of developing specific disease or condition. So for this, we compare with the case controls, and we see this one, which is if we do this type research, which is monitor for next 10 years, and we spend more money, right? More money, more work. So more laborers to put in the study than in case controls, because case control study, which is something happened already, we simply just uh, trace back, so backward, which is something in the past we have a kind, in the uh, patient records, something like that. So and then we just go to hospital or somewhere, they keep the record of the patient, something like that, and we want to see. But for cohort study, so of course for case control, which is something happened already, so that's why we cannot control the confounding factors, confounding bias, because happened already. But with the cohort study, which is we spend more money compared to the case control, but we able to, control the confounding factors. For example, like we just mentioned earlier, which is age and location, where they work, career, and where they live, etc. So like that, we try to match in two groups, with those factors. We try to reduce the confounding bias, confounding factors. Okay. So here the more detailed explanation, key characteristics. Observational. So researchers observe and collect data without manipulating any variables. Longitudinal data is collected at multiple time points, which is, for example, 10 years over the period of time, allow the study of disease development and progression. Follows a cohort. Some participants share the common characteristics or experience like age, location, occupation, like you mentioned earlier. Examines associations, cohort studies help determine if certain exposures, risk factors associated with specific outcomes like a disease development. So types of cohort studies, so prospective cohort study, which is something will happen, right? Which is researchers identify the cohort and follow them forward in time, collecting data as it becomes available. Now talk about retrospective cohort studies. So researchers look back in time, so it says something happened in the past already, using existing data to identify the cohort and track their outcomes. So, okay, advantage of cohort studies, strong evidence for causation. So by following participants over time, cohort studies can provide strong evidence for causal relationship between exposures, which is risk factors, and outcomes, which is some certain diseases. Examine multiple outcomes. Cohort studies can assess multiple outcomes associated with a single exposure. So study rare exposures. Cohort studies can be useful for study the health effects of rare exposure. For example, like in one area, like they just suddenly they build a manufacturer, they build a, some kind of factory, and they release some kind of toxic substance to the local, like that, to the people living there. But now the researcher think about maybe some risk factor from that manufacturers, from the factory release in the air, release in the soil, underground, in the water, things like that. So affecting the health, can develop some disease in that local. So then they do the research, monitor for 10 years, and they see so any relationship between that risk factor so with a certain disease can develop in that local people, you know. So this disadvantage of cohort study, time consuming and expensive, like we just mentioned, for example, monitor 5 years or 10 years, and a lot of money spent on 5 years or 10 years. Potential for bias. Loss to follow up can introduce bias, as can differences in characteristics of exposed and unexposed groups. Because people, the local people for the next 5 years or next 10 years, it's not just simply they just stay in that local for 5 years, 10 years. It could be because the jobs or something like that. They move out of the town, they reside somewhere else. So we lost a follow up. So not suitable for rare outcomes. Cohort studies are not ideal for studies diseases that occur very infrequently. Okay, so that's about it. And also with the twin concordance studies, and we know that already. And about the adoption study, also we knew that already. Okay, so today we'd like to share about some types of studies that are, of course, these five studies not everything, but at least we need to know that, know those things. Okay, and thank you very much. And